Sounds good. You mean you'll go to the audience, but you're going to stay here? Okay, yeah, because we still have minutes. I'm going to try and get through some of them, so at least 3. That's the goal. All right. Okay, George, we're ready to go. You ready to go? Okay, thanks. All right, welcome everybody. This is the March 21st, 2023 Town of Monroe Planning Board regular meeting. I would like to point out the fire exits. There are 2 in front of me or behind you in the audience. One over here to my left, which is the main entry that you came in from, and then another out side in this direction. Noreen, would you please do the roll call?
Bonnie Franson.
Present.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
Nick Napoli.
Here.
Pat Shea.
Here.
Dylan Penn.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, with that, let's all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We'll start with our continuing public hearings. First item on the agenda is Homeland Towers and Verizon Wireless at 2426 Strauss Lane, Monroe, New York. Welcome. If you would just introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. And for the record, my name is David Kenny. I'm an attorney with Snyder & Snyder, here tonight to represent the applicants Homeland Towers and Verizon Wireless. With me to my right is Vincent Xavier, Regional Manager of Homeland Towers. Since our last meeting, we actually did the second balloon float. That was done on March 6th. We also were able to redesign and do the site walk with the arborists and redesigned or configured the driveway so that we could have substantial tree saving. So before there was about 135 trees that were proposed to be removed. Now there's only about 83 trees to be removed. So it's over 52 trees have been saved by a reconfiguring of the driveway contours. As I said before, we did the balloon test, so we could go into that next, but we haven't made a formal submission for this yet. We'll get you the hard copy drawings and as well as the photosim report so that your experts can review it and provide comments to your satisfaction, so we can have that for your benefit for the next planning board meeting. But we did want to go over, we have the zoning drawings up there. They say Z.
Sure. So let me just,
Sure.
We'll have the applicant present and then open it to the public. Would that make sense, Ashley? Oh, since this is a public hearing? Okay. And we don't have to reopen it. It just remains open, or? Okay, thank you. All right, so which would you like me to open?
So there should be one on there called ZDs, zoning drawings.
This one?
Yep. So these are the plans. So if you can go down to, we have, let's see. We have, I guess, the best plan to go through for the trees preservation would be, it's near the end of the drawings. It's sheet TR1. We'll go to the next later. So TR1 is kind of an overlay of the driveway or the access drive, and then there's several details on here showing trees that are to be saved or removed, and there's also a list at the bottom, the left-hand side. These are the trees that meet the town code requirement of the 6-inch caliber or greater that are going to be removed. The next page is the tree list of the 6-inch caliber or greater that are to be remaining. And these are, this is 390 trees that are to remain. That's not the entire property. That's just within the confines of the project site. There's well more than 500 trees on this property. It's a fairly large wooded property, but these are trees that were picked up through our surveying of the access drive and the tower site. So these are ones that we've identified that will remain and will protect.
If I could just, basically, obviously there's a substantial tree savings that we were able to accomplish, so I just wanted to outline kind of how we were able to do that. If we could just go back to the previous page, I'd appreciate it. So first, for anybody who's been to the site, when you initially go into where we're going to start the access road, we were kind of planning to come a little more straight in, so that was going to take some more trees down. Right now, instead, we're going to maintain the kind of turns that begin at the beginning and start right as the existing access road does. So instead of carving it more straight, they're going to have to turn a little bit, but our engineers assure us that's fine. And then as you see going up here, there's really two ways we made additional savings. In the original set of plans, the turnaround, or the turn-offs rather, were on the right side. So now we had our engineer kind of switch the turnovers to the left, or where there was already no or less trees there, so we relocated those. And now as you'll see going up here, the road itself is a lot less straight. It's got a little bit more wave to it. It's still adequate for emergency vehicles and cranes and the like, but we just kind of, with the help of the arborist, identified trees that were sensitive and tried to get around them a bit.
Just real quick, so we see the location of the proposed road, and then there's sort of a dashed line below it. That's the kind of existing sort of wood road?
Correct.
Okay.
There seems to be,
No?
No, you mean the on the outsides, the little dashed lines?
No, right in here. See these
Oh.
dashed here?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes, that's the existing road.
Okay,
And
so
you'll
that gives us a good sense of whether it's following that original woods road, I'll call it.
correct. It's probably an old logging trail, and so
Yeah.
we're trying to follow that as much as possible. Obviously, that's already a cleared area, so it reduces the tree. But to make sure that we also preserving more mature trees or trees that are identified by the arborist as ones to be saved, sometimes we're deviating from that existing logging route to make sure we're saving some of those trees, even though it may result in the removal of 10 or 12 much smaller saplings or smaller trees.
Yeah, but we had him show that, we'll call it the logging road, throughout the next portion of the plan as well. So you can see exactly where we deviated. It should show that under.
You're right here. Talking to the mic, please. Right, so we could see the, kind of the woods road in the dashed line here, and this is where it's deviating in here. And you're saying that's to avoid substantial trees that the arborist had recommended?
In this instance, it's to make sure that the road itself is accessible with large vehicles.
Okay.
It was always the plan to go through there, but you'll see even as we're going through there now, there's like a weird kind of dip to it.
Right.
That was to save the trees, but we always at that point had to deviate from the road.
Right.
In part too, because you can see the road
Yeah.
actually goes up to the property line.
Right.
And if you're gonna build a road, then you have a little bit of limited disturbance on the sides for grading, so we had to be away from that anyway.
Okay.
And so this also includes the new tower location, which is approximately 50 feet to the northwest. So again, this is the alternative tower location, which we're proposing to the board based on its comments as an alternative location on the property for this tower. When we go through the photo sims, we have reproduced in the photo sims the original leaf-on photos from the original location and done them side by side with the leaf-off photos from this new location. So you can kind of see in a quick click the difference that would be from an alternative location 1 versus alternative location 2. And also you can see the difference between what it looks like during the leaf-on season and the leaf-off season.
I just wanted to scroll down. Here we go. So in terms of topography, you shifted closer
That property line right there.
to the northerly property line and kind of got off of, it was in this area generally?
Correct. It's 50 feet directly almost southeast from that, so that 50
So
feet
it was
below.
over here about,
Towards that line of evergreen trees.
If you
right,
look-
that's what we had suggested, to keep the evergreens to the extent we could and then add this to it.
Exactly.
Right.
It was in that direction. If you look at the top left, they do have the compass, so it's directly south, directly down is actually kind of southeast.
Southeast,
Yeah,
okay.
but it's approximate a 50-foot change in location, so it's not a significant change in location, but it's more in the direction that you were asking us to provide an alternative location for, and it's closer to these trees as well, so that may provide an additional screening opportunity for surrounding sites.
Okay.
So we do have as well, these are the drawings. We did provide the photo sims. Again, we can go through them tonight, but we just did submit them now. We can go through them at the next planning board meeting if you prefer, if you want to have the comments from your consultant then. But we're prepared tonight to go through it as well.
So I'm seeing,
The-
it's this one?
It's the one that says letter, the planning
Oh,
board letter.
okay.
Yeah, because
Got
this
it.
is a supplement to the VRA.
Are there any that you want to highlight, since we're just seeing this, so?
Sure. So if you go all the way down near the end, I think the one that we keep talking about is the view from Round Lake. So we did have some photos. I think that's the existing photo from there. If you can go the one below, it might show if it's the sim or not. So yeah, these are the simulations. So these first two, I think, we're just showing the actual balloon.
I think there's the.
Yeah, if it says
It looks like the
existing,
top.
and then, so you're gonna have to.
This is simulated.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to zoom in there. It's visible, but this is, again, maybe one of the reasonings why the monopole might be better than the monopine. Do you see it right there? I'll
Yep,
come
it's right
point
here.
it. Yeah, so it's very faint. Again, being a galvanized steel structure above the skyline from this distance, it's gonna be very thin profile, and then galvanized steel kind of patinas into the sky. Even though you see blue skies, it's not usually a bright blue, it's kind of a duller gray sometimes.
What I would like to see, if it's not here, I don't know if it is this tower with the co-locations. Just to understand, if all the co-locations were on it, then how does it compare to a monopine?
We can add that, we can add the full build-out. Again,
Yeah.
the application before you is right now, it's one
Understood.
carrier. If you go to the next one, there'll be the monopine views from the same location. There'll be, again, the leaf-on monopine. It's much more visible from here because you're adding, a different color against the blue background, so it's a little bit more prominent. It's a little bit of a thicker visual profile because you're adding more mass in the sky to hide the antennas. And if you go to the next one, that's from the leaf-off condition at the alternative location. So it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit shorter because of it's a different vantage point, but it's still, again, with this view, I think the monopine is a little bit more visible.
Is there a way to superimpose kind of the two images to show the difference in where they were located and the height? Just sort of, if Saratoga could just overlay the two?
Yeah, we can try to do that. So
Yeah.
like show the photo simulation of location 1 on the same photo of location 2 photo
Yeah,
simulation?
and maybe either not with 2, but with the first one, you could even just do an outline. It doesn't have to,
Okay.
to make it easier in terms of viewing, but just to get a sense
To
of
show you
how
where
it changed.
the other location is and the difference. Sure, we
Yeah.
can try to do that. And then, we have more photos in the rest. Again, what we tried to do here was the same photo simulations that we used in the first report. We tried to just use the same vantage points and do the photo simulations for the leaf-off conditions and the second location. This one is over, I think it's the colony, the condos. Again, we've had letters and public comments from people who live in these condominiums saying that they have a lack of service and they feel that this is a real public safety issue. There, you can see the monopine is just at the tree line right there. And then if you go to the next one, which is the alternative location, it's still within the tree line, but again, this is without any leaves on the trees.
So I will say where it is also very visible is on the back side of the hill. So from the Blooming Grove area. So, and you did point that out over where that corporate building is, Mediacom. So some of the roads over there, Mediacom, you can definitely see the balloon from those locations as well.
I'm pretty sure we don't have leaf-off photos from there.
Yeah,
Be-
I have balloon photos from there
Okay, good.
myself, yeah.
Our guy was apprehensive about going because the last time he did it, security kicked him off the property and said he was trespassing, so.
Yeah, no, I was on the
I don't
road.
think
I
he got-
wasn't, I wasn't in MediaCom, but
Yeah.
I was on the road there.
Well, if you can send us those photos, we
Yeah.
can have our person look at it. But again, I think from those vantage points, from the ones that we even had during the leaf on, it was still such a far away view of the tower that it, again, while the balloon was visible, it's going to be like a little dot to most people. So again, these were the balloons, and then here's the proposed towers. And that's the monopine. And that's the
So
monopine.
you could see the difference in the off-leaf.
Yeah. But also, the location that you had us go to is closer in the direction to Blooming Grove. So the shift in location actually made it a little bit more prominent
And
on
right.
that side of the mountain as
Yeah.
well. So not only is it the leaves off, but actually in the photos from that vantage point, you're a little bit closer, so it's going to appear a little bit taller.
Yeah, it's going to depend on where the viewpoint is, because in this instance, on the one hand, it may or may not be more visible, but from this specific vantage point, you see a couple of other trees, so it's not looking as if it's standing out, whereas on Round Lake, you have a very uniform canopy height, and this extends above that canopy height, so it becomes obvious with the monopine.
That's where it's becoming kind of
Yeah.
an opportunity for this board to weigh
Right.
in on where it feels the better aesthetic impact is, or the better visibility of the tower would be. If it would be, the monopole, as we've said before, it's thinner, it's more slender, and, having a galvanized steel finish, it really is, from most of these viewpoints, which are almost all of them are beyond 1,000 feet because of how big this property is and where you're kind of seeing it from. It's really going to be hard to spot, and a lot of it will be, a thin profile that, blends into the sky. Adding the monopine, I think, may make it more visible, but it will hide the antennas. So I think it's a decision for this board if it prefers to have a tower that's more visible, but it looks like a tree and it's hiding the antennas, or one that doesn't have a stealth design, but because of the lack of stealth design, maybe is less noticeable to the surrounding public.
So, as the first on the pole, you go to the highest location.
Correct.
Is the highest location and the lowest location, are they still equally acceptable as far as providing coverage?
So we don't have the information for the other carriers. What we do is we try to build it so that it has at least a likelihood that the carriers would go below. So we know for Verizon that this particular height is what they need for their coverage levels, but the 10 feet lower, it's likely that that would also provide reliable coverage to another carrier. But at this moment, this is all speculative, because I don't have that other carrier's network information to definitively say that or not.
So
But
how many co-locations can go on this right now?
up to 3 additional from Verizon. So the towers are always designed for all 4 major carriers in the
And
nation.
they have to be spread out 10 feet apart?
Exactly.
Okay, so the lowest would be,
About 66-foot rad center.
Correct.
In the middle of the antennas would be about 66 feet.
so you,
66
so the height of this one is
100.
100, and so,
You'd have 96, 86, 76, and then 66. When we were out there, our engineer did try to determine the height of those evergreen trees that were nearby, and he got about 60 feet for those.
so this is my question. If you were to do the RF analysis of how much coverage is provided at the lowest level, is it likely to meet needs? And I'm asking this for a reason.
Sure.
Because if it's not really practical to put 4 carriers on, and I don't know that 4 carriers are these days going on a tower. I don't know,
They absolutely
things are always, changing. But what I have seen also in very visible locations is, and I know this happened in the town of Shawangum, there was a spot that was very visible from Shawangum Ridge and in a scenic area, and they actually did a pole where all the antennae were internal to it. And I think we may have touched upon this. So the reason I ask is that, in theory, if you think about the coverage, is only really adequate for a couple of carriers, is there a way to do one of those kind of slimline towers that is either that height or slightly lower because now you only have 2 carriers on it?
So the short answer is no. The reason being is because one of those towers, they call them unipoles.
Right.
So they are really, they're not liked by the carriers for multiple reasons. First off is because the types of equipment that you can put in there is severely limited from the space and also from the amount of heat that gets exposed by radio units that they like to put right next to the antennas. Those kinds of unipoles, they don't allow the radio units to be right next to the antennas, so it adds to latency and it's a worse designed facility. But more importantly, it also requires that the antennas be vertically stacked. So right now, if you see our drawings that we show you, they have 3 different sectors of 3 different antennas, but they're all at the same 96-foot rad center height. To get that tower basically to have the unipole look, you would have to take probably at least 2 of those antennas side by side and then stack them vertically. So the lowest antennas would still have to be at the 96-foot rad center, so you would only be going taller in a pole. And also, it's just, as I said before, it's a worse design because, so what they're doing now with these types of facilities is they have antennas, but they also have remote radio units or remote radio heads. These add to the service, and so having the remote radio heads as close to the antennas as possible reduces latency, and it helps with a better service. Having them located at ground level, which is what is required for a unipole, it just makes that entire cord from the antenna to the radio unit a chance for latency. So it's kind of a design that carriers are trying to stray away from if they can, but just from a practical standpoint of trying to reduce the height of the tower, it wouldn't.
Okay.
But also, again, Verizon's coming in here with an initial capital investment to fill its gap in coverage with building this new tower. Another carrier may come in, and while they may not get the most ideal coverage that they want, they may get sufficient enough coverage for them to go ahead and co-locate below Verizon or even lower than the second carrier on the tower, because for them it's a much less capital or a lower capital investment to just co-locate on an existing structure than to try to invest in a whole new tower to fill a gap in service.
I'm wondering about, because if you're talking about 60 or so being the last carrier, and the trees you mentioned were around 60, is it really going to be feasible or optimal for the lowest carrier? And is this really in reality only going to be 3 co-locations?
Depends on who that carrier is and what their service levels are. So I'll let you know now that I represent not only Verizon but other carriers, and I do know certain carriers that are now out, putting out their national rollout. They do go for these lower rad centers that are below the tree lines, because to them it's better to have that coverage than to have no coverage. So yeah, again, it may not be ideal coverage. You'll still, if they have a need for it and there's an opportunity for them to co-locate, if you build it, they will come. But more likely than not, I think you're going to see at least 2 to 3 carriers. I've worked with Homeland on several sites. Almost all of the sites have their first carrier installed, and within at least a year or 2, you have a second carrier come knocking on the door.
And if I could just say, from a business perspective, if this was just going to be a 1-carrier pole, it wouldn't make sense as a monetary investment for my company to do it. The 4th carrier on would probably be Dish Network, and as he was intimating that they're more willing to accept a smaller footprint and be lower because they're the low-cost provider, and it's just, they're trying to build out based on FCC requirements at this point. But as long as the trees and the tree clutter aren't immediately close to the antennas, the attenuation that's blocked from those leaves is far less. So as long as they're a little bit above, we're still confident that we'll have other carriers that are looking to locate on this tower because it's well located, and because it's not just a capacity issue, it's an actual new geographic coverage issue. We think it's a good investment that other carriers will come on.
Board members, again, this is just an initial presentation. We haven't seen these in advance, but I'll start to my left. Nick, do we have any comments or questions you want to add?
I guess just to pile on top, yeah, I really guess it's preference, right? I guess we'll see what the public says about it and see how they feel about it. It really doesn't affect me personally because I'm facing the beach on Round Lake. That's my area. And the only comment I would add or request is, if we do the monopine, can we get Christmas lights up on that thing? Maybe a
Well, and
star?
The FAA has said we don't need to light it at all.
All right, all
We'll
right.
put
Then
the
that's
town star up there.
Something, all right.
Before we move on, though, I would actually like to point out one more thing. The very last page of this document has some line-of-sight profiles from, two neighbors, but three of the properties that were brought up at the last
Oh,
public
okay.
hearing. So if we could just touch on that briefly.
These are, again, from three different properties. One is from 8 Orchard, and the other are two from Old Quaker. These were at the public hearing when we had two public comments from residents that were concerned about being able to see the tower from their properties. We did these line of sight photos to show that it's highly unlikely that they'd be able to see the tower. Again, through the sheer distance, the change in topography, and most importantly, the intervening vegetation.
Are these to scale, both vertical and horizontal, do you know? I see a scale on the bottom image, but I'm not sure if there's what the scale is for the other images.
I have to confirm, but if you look at the bottom of each of the drawings, they're showing the distances, and then the height elevation distances is on the left.
Right, but in other words, is this like one to, let's say, 250 scale, and then vertically, what's the 1 inch to?
Yeah, I'll have to confirm what the scale is, but yeah, the point is exactly that, these are scaled against each other, so to speak, the distance versus the change in elevation. But yeah, I'll confirm if there's an exact 1-to-1 or something like that.
Yeah, just because sometimes the image itself can be distorted,
Sure.
or there's a sense of distortion depending on what that vertical and horizontal scale is.
Understood. I think the point here, though, and again, these are, line of sight drawings, is that the little, kind of the line from the house, so to speak, is going in between the trees, or it's, going over the top of the tower because of a change in elevation. And what really, that's showing and demonstrating is that the views from these properties would not be able to see the tower, or if there was any visibility of the tower, it'd be through a severe amount of intervening vegetation.
Thank you. Jeff, do you have comments?
Two things. So one of the conversations earlier when we were talking about the possibility of moving the tower on the ridgetop there was that it might require additional height on the tower. I assume from what I'm gathering that we're still talking about a 100-foot tower in the new location, that was acceptable.
Absolutely correct. In fact, that was the thing we wanted to confirm before we moved it into location, so that was something we were able to confirm.
The other question I have is, so because of the co-locations, and they're going to be stacked on top of each other, it's going to add more mass at the top of the tower. I assume even in the galvanized steel that that view may be that much more visible because it's just going to be more up there. And so when you have 3 or maybe 4 co-locations, does that benefit more from the monopine in that situation because there's just antenna over antenna over antenna in a situation like the Round Lake view?
Sure. So I think what the chairwoman asked was us to provide a sim that shows a full build out. I think that'll be something that'll help you kind of color that question.
Great.
But if you see from a lot of the different photo sims, it's just barely the Verizon antennas that are sticking above the tree line. So I think from most vantage points, it'll have a negligible effect because you won't be able to see the co-locating antennas below the tree line. But for some views, yeah, it may be a difference. I think the antennas, though, again, will always be thinner and less of a visual profile than the monopine because just as a practical matter, I have to put more stuff in the sky to hide those antennas. And the antennas and the galvanized steel is kind of more closely blending in with the skyline versus the tree. But this is a point for, the board to discuss and to weigh its opinion on.
Thank you.
So the monopole, I just want to get my facts straight here. The monopole, that design is less preferred by the other carriers because
No. The monopole and the monopine are both fine. Those are options we're presenting. What the chairwoman was asking was a different type of structure, which is called a unipole. Those are where, like, the
okay.
antennas are the inside of the tower.
Okay.
You
So it's
sometimes see
not-
this on the flagpoles that are
Right.
long.
It looks like a flagpole without a flag,
But then, if
but
you've
it's so
seen them,
streamlined that it doesn't have all the antennas coming off of it.
Saying that's not an option here. They're only doing monopole or
Well-
mono.
correct, it would necessitate a taller tower, and it's something that the carriers are not really intrigued on trying to develop.
Right.
If you've seen the one that's over by, I think it's right on 17, right when you're coming off of 87, there's a flagpole there. Another issue is you're seeing is that when they do these co-locations or modifications, the antennas get bigger, so then they bump out a section of the flagpole, and it's required as an eligible facilities request to be approved. So you may have originally approved this tall, slender pole, and then, 5 years, you'll get a bump out in one section, and then.
Pat, comments?
I still like the monopine. I'd really like to see how the public feels about it, though.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Dylan?
Is monopine, monopole up for vote, or,
Not right now. I
Yeah.
think we want to see some additional
but
simulations.
eventually with
Of-
us?
Eventually,
Yeah.
yes. And,
So-
go ahead.
My question was the battery backup. How many days backup does that provide? And does that change with additional carriers?
So generally, each carrier would have its own battery backup support. I'd have to confirm with the carrier, but it's kind of a moving target. So it depends on how high usage is going on. If you're operating at full power, full capacity, your battery's not going to last as long as if, there's not many phone calls being used or there's not as high a capacity being used as that tower. I think generally it's anywhere between 8 and 48 hours, but I'll have to talk with the carrier and confirm.
So it's up to the different co-carriers, it's up to their discretion how big their battery's going to be or if they have one at all.
Correct. Sometimes a carrier may, instead of just a battery backup, they may propose a generator. That would require a separate application, and that application would come to this board. But yeah, sometimes they go above and beyond batteries and do a backup power supply like a generator.
So in terms of the design of the pole itself, part of the thing with the monopine is it doesn't entirely look like a natural pine because it's bushy up at the top. So in other words, it's not that Christmas tree, kind of shape. So the other question I have is, because I know you had presented a couple of other pictures, for argument's sake, if there were 3 carriers on it, can you get a design where your equipment is slightly lower so that you can get a slightly more tapered look to that pine?
So
So in other words, the top of the pole is where the branching begins, and then it comes down to your equipment, perhaps 10 feet lower, and then continues on, so it doesn't look like this, the bottle brush look.
So the way they accomplish this is they put on top of the monopole or the top of the steel what we call a tree topper. Is eventually a 5-foot kind of extension to the top that helps with that taper design. It creates that point at the top of the tower.
So that's not incorporated in this visual.
No, it was incorporated in the visual.
It was.
Just the very top is a little topper that creates like a point at the top. What you're talking about basically is the rest of the tower. In order to make that tapered effect, you wouldn't necessarily need to lower the antennas. You would extend the branches. The branches, even at the very top, are already intended to go out past the size of the antennas and the mount. So, we would have to design it so that, at the top you have 8-foot branches, and then the next foot down you got 10-foot branches and 12-foot. It's still not going to look like, a Rockefeller tree with a giant taper, but you can taper out a little bit more than even our photo sims are indicating here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd be curious to see what that looks like, because see this
It
guy
is-
here?
Yeah.
See how a more natural evergreen in here?
Yeah, at the next meeting, I'm going to
And
bring in a
even this one
photograph I
here
took.
is, again, there's more of a taper, which this is not portraying, but the point being, getting it less up here might help. But again, I think we just want to also explore the different types of designs that if we do go with the pine, that it's trying to be as naturalistic as possible.
Sure. We can have more information on that at the next meeting, but I
Okay.
think what Vincent said is basically it's the extension of the branches that go on the tree to help give that taper design. It
Okay.
wouldn't be lowering the antennas or changing any of that, but there's some things we can play with here to try to make it a better design.
Okay, thank you.
But there is, obviously is a limit too. You can't have like a 20-foot branch sticking out.
Right.
You know, but
Understood.
there are things we can do, and we'll get you some more. And I also want to show you a photo from basically the other side of this mountain where I thought it was a cell tower, but it's actually a pine tree that looks actually more like that without a taper.
It's
So
on this set here?
No, it's
Oh,
just
okay.
a personal photo I took. I'll have to bring it.
You'll submit it, okay.
But yeah, no, I definitely understand the taper, and we can have that be a condition of the resolution where what we've done, actually, I believe in New Paltz, is limit the actual mount size as well, so that, you know, each carrier doesn't have, Verizon comes in, they're proposing 8-foot mount. Have that be a little bit more uniform, and then gently, you know, go the branches out to start from maybe 8 foot.
Yeah, it's, I mean, obviously below the canopy isn't as important as what's visible above the canopy. One other thing, and then we'll turn it over to the consultants, and then we'll open it up to the public. Where are you in terms of status with the ZBA?
So with the ZBA, they're waiting for this board to take action on SECRA,
Okay.
but we're continuing to meet with them and update them on our progress.
Okay.
So we're going to meet with them at the next meeting, give them a presentation on these different options, and hopefully they will, before your next meeting, provide at least their opinion or recommendation on what they prefer.
Okay. And then just finally, maybe we could get a couple of, some of the resolution on these photos is a little limited when you really zoom in. And so if we could just get some focused photos, this vantage point, you know, so that when we zoom in, we see a little better. I know there's limitations, but perhaps something a little better.
It's a little bit limitations, but it's also, again, the point of these photo sims is to give you really, it's for the 11 by 17. If you hold it at arm's length, that is really supposed to represent what the actual viewer is going to see. So when we zoom in on these, while it's good to look at, you know, what, you know, the zoomed in version of this tower looks like, that's not an actual recount of visibility. That's not an actual exhibit of what someone's actual viewpoint's going to be. So we can try to do that, but I think it is more important to always come back to the zoomed out photo to show that, you know, this from this distance, it's going to have a much more limited visual impact.
Agreed. I think it's just, for me, a little bit of scale to be able to zoom in and see what it's going to look like.
So maybe what we
Beyond the understanding that this is a view shed analysis and we're trying to see what it looks like from the vantage point as if you were looking at it, you know, from your car, et cetera.
Sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, maybe we can get some additional photos, and we're already going to look into some of the different, you know, tree designs. Maybe we can get some information with that.
Perfect. Thank you. Sean?
Sure. So I don't have a review because there was nothing new submitted. I just had a follow-up question to Dylan's question about backup power. With the additional 3 carriers, is the full build-out on the ground to the max that will potentially be needed by those additional carriers?
Correct. So the equipment compound fence, the whole fenced area is for multi-carriers. So they've built that fence so that there would be enough room for all of the different carriers to locate within the fence without expanding it.
All right, great.
Ashley, do you have comments?
The only thing would be the shot clock. So currently it's extended through April 18th, I believe. So you're likely going to need another extension. I don't know if you want to discuss that tonight, or you will have a meeting before that runs out, but just something to keep in mind there.
Thank you. That's up to you if you want to do something today, or if you'd like to wait till April, or if you want to.
We could do it tonight or April. Obviously, I'm going to extend it. You know, ideally, I would ask if this board could at least make the secret determination in April so that we can, because we're going to have another public hearing process before the ZBA, and, you know, we're going to have to extend the shot clock for them as well. So I would just implore you, if there's any way we can at least get the secret determination next month to move the process forward. But if you want us to extend it now or in April, obviously, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, at least from my perspective, I think the secret determination comes down to the visual. And so I think until the board is comfortable with the impact on the view shed. I don't know that we'll be ready to do the seeker determination. I think pretty much everything has been addressed. You really made an effort to change the layout, the location, the clear cutting of the trees. And so I think those have all been obviously, beneficial in reducing impacts. So I think we just need to come down to finally, and hopefully you'll have the materials, to us in advance so that we can actually then deliberate and make a decision on the pole. If we do that at the workshop, perhaps we could do something by regular meeting, but it all comes down to what's submitted. So that's kind of where we are. But we're getting closer.
What is the next meeting date in April?
Sean?
Sorry, if you want to answer the question.
I think Noreen's looking it up.
The workshop is April 13th, and the regular meeting is April 18th. Submission for the meetings is the 30th, March 30th by noon.
See any advantage coming in for the workshop to kind of go through what we have at that time? Yeah, we'll do the workshop, kind of see where we're at in order to try to help the ball go a little bit.
Yeah, and then let's see how things go. So, yeah. So, I think at this point we can leave the shot clock as it is, and then depending on the outcome of the April meeting, we'll know whether to extend the shot clock or not. But I think we have to extend it, frankly,
You'll
we'll
need
have to do it anyway, because even
Do
if we
it,
do
but
the
you could-
seeker, we still have to do the site plan.
You'll need
We'll
to,
have
you
to-
could discuss it at the workshop meeting, though, when you,
Yeah,
how long.
how long to go out.
Exactly. By that time, maybe we'll have a better understanding of how far in advance we need to extend.
Right, because then you have to go to the ZBA, you have to get your variance, you have to come back to us.
Yep.
So,
I just want to add to the seeker, because of the new driveway configuration, it could affect the limits of disturbance. I know we were close to that threshold for the SWIP, so.
Well, we can definitely confirm that, but if anything, it's less now because we also pulled the site 50 feet closer
Okay.
to the road. So, and my engineer didn't indicate that anything we've done triggered the acre rule to put
Okay.
us into a SWIP.
thank you. All right. With that, I will ask if there are any members of the public who'd like to come up and speak to the application. Please come up. And then just state your name and address for the record. Just remember to state your name and address for the record. Yeah, you could, you have to speak on the mic so that it'll be recorded. A little farther. You'll see the red light come on when you're speaking into it if you
I'll
push
pull
it
closer to you.
closer to you.
Closer?
Yeah, there you go. See how
Okay.
it's, yeah.
My name is Michelle Furbeck. I live on Orchard Street, right at the bottom of the hill from where the cell tower is being constructed. I just actually had some general comments. I'm not completely familiar with the procedures in place for your board or how anything works. I'm ignorant to most of the process. We didn't know, my husband and I didn't know about the cell tower construction until we got the certified letter back in, I think it was January, 10 days before the first meeting that my husband spoke at. Since then, things have transpired. They did do the second balloon test. We were aware of it. Now we're paying attention. We got the email from the town. We know the notification was made. And I'm going to say this is not as a complaint. This is so that you as the board are aware. The law firm, I guess, is the one who is sending the letters to the residents. And there must be some protocol behind why we got a letter and our neighbor 2 houses down didn't. I'm sure there is a legal statute to that, I'm assuming. But I thought you should know as the board, this letter that came about the second balloon test that was just done at the beginning of the month was postmarked the Friday before the Monday of the balloon test. It came in the mail that afternoon after the balloon test had been done. Now, that's not a complaint. It wasn't detrimental to us. My husband and I, like I said, we've been following what you've been doing. We knew about it, so it wasn't harmful to us. But I just, it felt very disappointing because this cell tower has brought to light, in my mind, something that when I speak to other town residents, people aren't aware of really what's going on. I'm very thankful to this board when I've been here this is now the third meeting, and I've read your minutes and the agendas. You're all paying attention, asking a lot of questions that are going through our minds, and I appreciate that very much. I don't see the same type of attention from other town board meetings, but I won't get into that. I'm just bringing to light the fact that I think there should be more of an effort, if not, and I'm not saying of the board itself, and I don't know the relationship between the board in this case and the law firm representing the cell phone, but I thought you should know that. I think the citizens and the taxpayers should be privy to a little bit more information in a little bit more of an advanced fashion so that you can be prepared. To me, this cell phone tower is a big deal. I'm happy that it doesn't seem like we can see it from our home. We didn't see the balloon, so that makes me a little happier. I'm still not happy about it being there, though, for a lot of reasons. You can drive around the area, less than a half a mile from our house and see it. Other residents are going to look out their window and see it. So I just think it's important enough that it's more fair if the residents know about what's going on more than 10 days before something important is going to happen. You can't go on the town website and see meeting agendas and minutes and know what's gone on. They're not posted for sometimes several months.
Right.
So that also doesn't give you an avenue for being very much prepared. So I'm just, again, it's not a complaint as far as when that letter arrived. I just thought it was important for you to know that.
Yeah, so,
The timeliness of it is very disappointing, and it was the second time around. You would
So-
think that there would be a little bit more of a,
I was going to say that if you have a copy of that and the postmark, I don't know if you
I
kept
do
it or
have it at
not.
home, I don't have it with me, but I
Yeah,
do have it
just
at home. I saved
photocopy it and share it with us.
So, and this more, again, for your reference, for future knowledge, so that if any part of that part of the process you have control over, you know
Right.
what's gone on.
I would only, just to add, so we appreciate your comments. The agenda are posted before the meeting, and they're on,
Yes, I'm talking
the
about the
website.
the minutes. So, things like that.
So minutes need to be done.
They release them when they're done.
They're supposed to be done within 2 weeks, so that's something that we're working on.
It's not just this board. I've looked at all the minutes from all the
It's,
different.
it's true of all the boards. There's New York State law with regard to that maybe Ashley knows the specific timeframes, but there is a requirement that the draft minutes be posted by a certain time period.
But the town sends out emails. I get them all. I get at least one a day.
Yeah.
About everything going on. Not so much things that might be a little bit more controversial in nature like this.
So, yeah, so-
if they could send out the email about the balloon test this time around,
That
because there was
was,
a little bit more attention brought to it, why couldn't that have been done, last April?
the planning board, so the emails typically come from the town.
Yes,
And
that's
town
right.
government and
Right.
not necessarily town board, but the town. And so the planning board doesn't really think about that because we don't post that. We do post to the website. We
Right.
have our site plans. We post as much as we can, but that is a good point as
Or
far
of
as
a comment,
emails.
Like, again, not specific to this board.
Yeah.
But just a comment in general.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I
It's
think-
where the residents can get their information, and it's kind of.
I think the email's a good point.
Yeah.
It-
And
with-
so is the
yeah.
town website is not, I'm not an IT person, but it's not necessarily user-friendly. It's not, you have to go on there and search for cell tower to really see this stuff come up. It's not, I'm not saying everything should be right on the homepage, but I just feel like, things could be a little bit more available,
Well,
a little bit more.
yeah, we'll communicate that, thank you.
The only other comment I had, in listening to everything they said, is that what concerns me is that there's already other towers been constructed in Monroe, in our neighbor town, Chester, and the reasoning for having to put this cell tower in a completely residential area is that there's a demand for it, that the other towers are no longer able to satisfy the demand in the area. Well, everybody that lives anywhere near here knows about the growth in this area, not just what has happened, but you can see what is happening and what will happen in the future. So the one thing I wanted to just ask you to keep in mind is that, is this cell tower going to start a precedent? Because I find it hard to believe that this will be the last time there's an issue about demand. Our town is growing so quickly, the population and so forth, the demand has to be growing as well. So what's going to happen the next time they want to put another cell tower up?
So,
So are we gonna have cell towers every couple miles? And, that's my fear.
Right.
And I'm just,
We have
no
asked
one has a
for-
crystal ball, but I'm just,
We-
bringing
yeah,
that up
we-
as a point.
we have asked for a plan in the past, but I don't know to what extent the plan exists as far as future rollout of sites. But, at least from my perspective, I think some of this growth occurred during COVID, occurred during Zoom meetings, occurred during video conferencing, streaming services. There's been general growth, period, where it's not necessarily cable related. And so it's not necessarily just population growth. I think it's the growth in the trend of the way we receive communication now. And we are, preempted, or they preempt in some ways our ability to say no. If a finding is shown that there's a need, we as a community have very little to say other than, what we can say, and what municipalities do is say, is there an alternative location? If there's a tall structure that's within 100 feet, or within the area that they want to provide service, can they locate there? So we try and find alternatives, but it's very difficult to say no.
It's just a concern.
Understood.
Thank you for your time and all the attention that you have put into this.
Sure.
Bonnie?
Yes, thank you.
Michelle, before you step away, just two things, if I may. My first question is, from what you've seen, and you've been here for several meetings now, do you have an opinion so far on monopole, monopine?
Really, I don't like the idea of it being there at all, but I do, you were making a point about, when it's just a pole that has one appearance, my husband and I have discussed this too before we knew whether or not it was visible right from our backyard or not. And we said, well, once the carriers are added to the pole, as you pointed out, of course it's going to be a lot bulkier.
Right.
So it's going to be that much more visible from everywhere. So I don't know that I have a comment either way.
I'm not sure that I've settled on my opinion on this one yet either, but I was curious what your thought
I think no
was.
matter what, it's going to be a very obvious thing. I think you're going to notice it no matter what.
And
I think we need a
Especially from Round
special,
Lake. I mean, when you drove around when they did the balloon test, there were certain spots you could see it, but you had to really look. There were other spots where it's
right.
right out there. So
And I've
there's no
looked at,
hiding it.
I've definitely looked at canopies where you do see like a tree will suddenly pop up, a natural tree, but it has to look right. And so we may create the first town of Monroe monopole design. It's perfect.
Probably because we have, the leads on and off.
Yeah, exactly.
To your point about the growth, the proliferation of towers, if you've driven recently between Monroe and Chester on the Quickway, you can see where O&R has a project going on. They're building additional transmission lines. And the reality is that's because there's increased demand and increased need for redundancies and that sort of thing, because we all use electricity. Well, we're all using this. I'm powering this off of the internet. We're all drawing off of this. And yeah, I think you can count on that there is going to be a proliferation of some kind or another. This is since Bonnie and I have been doing this, I think this is our third cell project that we're doing. And like with every application that comes before us, not just cell, our job for you is to get the result, if we wind up approving this, to be the best possible result for everybody. And we're going to continue to do that. So I just want to assure you of that.
And I thank you very much. Like I said, I can see the amount of attention you're all giving this. You're all asking a lot of questions, and you're requesting more information, and you're delaying it until you have more information. So I appreciate that very much. It's just, I just thought maybe just to, mention some of the things that go through our minds, too.
Well, and for what it's worth, the other two were co-locations. So one was on the water tower over by Target, and the other was on the building right off of Route 17, the interchange. Yep. So we've had some luck. This is really our first
The other
tower.
thing, too, about the population growth, I understand what you're saying. So there's been a a balloon of need for cell phone use because of the pandemic. I am sure the population growth is going to add to that demand, but also technology changes. So what happens then in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, that's my point. And I get we can't control, maybe we can control the growth, I don't know. But that's just, it's just, kind of kicking the can down the road a little
Yeah.
bit. And
The good
demand is
news-
the excuse for needing the tower. And to your point, when will it end? We're going to have
Technology.
towers and wires and stuff
Well,
everywhere, and it's just,
Technology does change, and there may not be a need for towers, who knows? And I think that typically there is a bond or something put into place for the removal of the towers to ensure that once they're no longer needed, they go away. So that's part of the process, too.
So you're aware that when Jeff says approve the project, the decision that the project gets squashed or goes on isn't really dependent upon us. It really comes from the feds. Okay.
You're the ones that seem to be paying attention and requesting all the information
Yeah.
on behalf of everybody.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, oh, let me just,
Like the chairperson said, it really it's up to
voice some concerns and
Yeah.
have you run with it.
it's up to us is just to mitigate and
Yeah.
just place
With,
everything.
with all the projects, it's two things. Does it fit within the laws, or does it not? If it doesn't, then it's not going to get approved. And once it fits within the laws, how do we perfect that? And that's our function here, is to come back with the best possible project for our community within the law.
We're right there with
Thank you.
We're right there with you. So.
Very much.
Tracy? Good evening. The light has to be
There?
red.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. My name's Tracy Shu, 94 Pickerel Road, Monroe, New York. As I was here at the last public hearing. I don't live next to the cell tower, but I was kind of here as a witness to the process of a cell tower being approved in Chester, just a few miles away. So I wanted to bring what I learned from there to you. Unfortunately, in Chester, they had a much more speedy review. So I wanted to commend this board for taking your time to do a thorough analysis and try to mitigate the impacts. For instance, doing this leaf-off analysis, although it was during a work week, I don't, if a lot of people were able to take a look at it, but you did send notice in advance, so that is good. But now to hear that there might have been a problem with that, I'm not so sure that's ideal. But you also they said they were going to visit a family that was concerned about the sites, and then you're also looking at alternatives. And then tonight, I was very happy to hear you asking a lot of questions about the height, really analyzing, where, if it was lower, and the designs. And again, I think you guys explained in the first meeting about how it could always come back and go higher, a certain percentage-wise, after this gets approved. So, if you go lower and then they just can come back and, or if you stay at this height, it could be higher. So I'm glad to hear that you are looking at all that. And you also brought up the fact that these visual analyses are showing one antenna versus, the 3 or 4 that could be on there. So, none of those things really happened in Chester, and it was unfortunate because they also told the residents they were going to look into camouflaging it, but at the end of the day, they were convinced by the applicant not to, and they also went with this gray color, which I'm going to hand into you so you can see. So I hope they're still in the process of building the tower over at Walton Lake Estates. So I would encourage you guys to drive over there and see, because the photos just don't do it justice. Even though it looks like a sore thumb in these photos, it's even more prevalent as you drive around the neighborhood. And I think had that board reconsidered and possibly went with the stealth pine, it would have been better for these folks. But they didn't look at it in the leaf-off conditions. This color does stand out. And they also didn't adjust the height. That's at 150 feet. And I think had they lowered it, it definitely would have looked better. But, that's what happened there. So I wanted to just hand that in to you. I also wanted to submit photos I drove around that day where I could, just to see, and it was really windy. So the balloon was coming and moving down and then popping back up again. And so it really doesn't really reflect what you were going to see when it's a tower. I think it's unnatural. It's not, I think it's going to stand out if you don't do something with the color and have, maybe it's a crossbreed of a stealth pine and a cell tower. Because if you can see a cell tower in the village of Monroe on the mountain when you come down, I mean, that's what, what you're going to see. But if this is lower and has some natural looking to it, I think as you drive by you, it's not going to stand out as it will if it's not. If you're driving by someplace, even if it's a tree unnaturally on a hill, it's going to look better than something that's just not supposed to be there. And when I drove down Bull Mill Road, there are trees, these pine trees that just kind of stick up out of nowhere. And I never noticed them before because now I'm looking. So I'm like, oh, these things, but I didn't notice them before, and that's my point. But I would notice if there was a cell tower there, I think. But again, I don't live next to this, but I did when I drove down Bull Mill Road. I turned up Country Woods Road and up to Camelback. And there I was quite surprised that those folks, the people on the higher elevation up there, will see this from their backyard. And yet they're in Blooming Grove, I believe, and they don't know about this. So I took, a couple photos from, that perspective. And then when they're out in their pools and having their barbecues, they're going to see this tower. And so I'm going to submit that to you so you can see the difference between the original photo angles. And that's the other thing. I know they have a job to do and get this approved. But I'm glad to hear that a lot of you drove out and around and looked for yourselves of what you can see versus what you can't really get from a photo and out in real life circumstances. So anyway, basically I was just going to point that out, that I don't know that those residents know about this tower, and I just hope that that they give you their opinions, because it seems like you're very open to what the public thinks, which I think is also great. So I just thank you for that, and I'll just submit this for the record.
Thank you. Yes, why don't you give that to Noreen? Is that a single copy so that she can make copies from? Okay, perfect.
That being said, Tracy, am I putting you down for pine? I'm taking a tally. One for pine. Two for pine?
I tend to be pine. You can put me down for pine.
Did Michelle want pine? No, Michelle was undecided, right?
Michelle was undecided. We don't know about her husband, though.
All right.
With regard to your comments, yes, the balloons were popping up and down. When I was in Blooming Grove, I was standing there a little and waiting for it to pop back up because I wasn't sure. You had to be there a few minutes to make sure that you got the ultimate, the height. And in fact, I did email, I think, or text the applicant saying, these things are, it's very, very windy. It just, it's tough during this time of the year. We get the off-leaf benefit, but then we get sometimes the wind, as well, unfortunately. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, just to speak to that, again, the whole point of the balloon test is really to produce this visual resource evaluation so that you can have the photo sims.
Yeah.
A 3-foot diameter orange-colored balloon is not really the same visibility as you're going to have as the monopine or even the monopole.
Especially to verify height.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's from making sure that, while we had those view shed maps where we think this is areas where we think the tower may or may not be visible, the balloon will actually verify that. So that's really what the main purpose is to verify those locations in the view shed maps to make sure that they're accurate, and then to produce this where you're actually going to see the full visibility or simulated visibility of the tower. And
The other reality was this was a relocated, because this was at the relocated, I believe.
correct. This is
This
was
is a
the
new
second
location,
balloon
so this
float.
was also simulating the revised location as well.
Correct. It
Yeah.
was simulating the revised location, and although Vincent had done his best to get the leaf-off photos, this was an opportunity to float the balloon during the leaf-off conditions so that we could have as close as we could to having a same for viewpoint locations. And then just as a couple of the comments that we heard, I just wanted to speak. We did get the notices out on Friday. There was a snow that week that delayed a little bit of getting the notices out. We only had received the notice earlier that week. But again, this whole public hearing that we're having now was one that we had requested. This was actually an optional public hearing that we didn't even need to have. So I hope it's seen that we are trying to go above and beyond to get the input from the public and make sure that we are hearing the public's comments and treating them as such and making sure that we are giving them the respect that they deserve.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody else from the public want to come up, speak? All right, with that, I guess we'll adjourn the public hearing to the April 18th meeting date? Is that our regular, or is April 18th the?
13th is the workshop, so I
Eight-
don't know if you wanted, because they were going to come to the workshop to review, I thought whatever.
Yeah, I'm wondering, do we continue the public hearing to the regular, so they show up to the workshop just to discuss, or should we continue and then have the public hearing at the regular, or just we can do the public hearing at the workshop?
Right.
All right, why don't we continue to the workshop?
Sounds good.
Yeah, so that if people, are present as we're discussing the options, they can also participate.
Sounds like a smart.
Yeah.
During the public hearing to April 13th at 7 PM? I believe that was 6 PM, I'm sorry.
I know.
Where you been,
I just
Ash?
changed
Where
my
you been?
schedule, it still says 7. All right, I'll make a motion that we adjourn and continue the public hearing on April 13th at 6 PM or as soon thereafter. May I have a second?
Second?
I was going to say no.
I was looking at Pat, but the voice
And I'm
came
like,
from the other.
nobody's-
Noreen?
Mick Napoli,
Aye.
Jeff Manson.
Aye.
Bonnie Franson.
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
Dylan Penn.
Aye.
Thank you.
Very
And
much.
thank you, I appreciate all the work you've been, making in terms of the visual sims and getting us a sense of what this will look like, so I appreciate it, thanks.
Thank you. We'll hopefully get you everything you need by the 15th.
Goal line.
Thank you.
Come drive back.
And just so the public knows, you
Bring
won't
it
be
Tuesday.
receiving another notice of the public hearing since it's been announced tonight.
Do you have the little toppy thing? Okay. It's warm in here, or is it me? It's my agenda. I accidentally X'd out my agenda. All right, next item on the agenda, returning projects, is Monroe Commons on Inninger Road. If you'd all come up and state your name for the record. And we're going to add the Zoom, correct? I'm sorry, say that again? We have other consultants that are waiting, so is Sherry Tor going to be quick? Is it basically the resolution? 'Cause- we will take Sherry Tora. We can do that. And then spend more time on the Monroe Commons as necessary, if that's okay. Is that all right with the board? Yeah? All right.
Evening, Joel Mann. Behalf of Shara Toiro, Joel Mann from Brachman Associates. So basically, I believe there is mainly one open comment that's to have a signed site plan. John Queen is supposed to submit that. So, but everything is on the site plan. It will be done in the next, he will have it probably in a day or two, the site plan under his title block with everything. So with that, I don't see any issues. I've seen the draft resolution, and I think everything is clear. And if we can go ahead and ask the board to vote on the resolution, or if there's any open questions that I'm ready to address.
So I'll go to the consultants. I know, Sean, you had a memo?
So, last time we had discussed having myself review the plan with Ben for fire access and such, and site circulation. Ben said he has no objection, he just wanted to make sure that the turning radii were checked against AASHTO to make sure that buses could actually maneuver. I did check that. The turning radii are basically to the minimum allowed by ASHTO. So I just suggested that some bollards be placed by the AC units near the northeast corner of the school so that they, don't get hit and damaged if a bus accidentally hits them, as well as potentially asking the applicant to just modify some of the concrete barrier locations to, provide some additional turning space.
Was actually a comment by John too, and he wants to make it, to adjust that a little bit.
Sure.
So-
And really, that was my only comment with regards to the application. So.
Thank you. Ashley, anything?
So there is one change. This was referred to Orange County Planning Department back in December, but you haven't received a response. The way the resolution's drafted, it was anticipating a local determination, so that section will have to be modified saying that the 30 days has passed, so you're able to take action without getting their comments.
Okay, so, planning board members, any comments on this? Are you ready to take action? Yes, yes, yes. So we'll go through the resolution, and then Ashley can point out where the resolution will be changed before I sign it, and we'll amend it as a condition of the approval. So this is a resolution of approval. Actually, does someone else want to read this? No? Any takers? Okay. Resolution of approval, site plan. This is an amended site plan. Temporary trailer permit authorization for Congregation Sherry Torah, temporary girls' school, Larkin Drive. Nature of application, and I'll just summarize. Congregation Sherry Torah applied for approval of amended site plan to extend the temporary approval of temporary classroom trailers for use as a school during school construction for a period of 3 years. And in relation to that, there are certain traffic and circulation improvements that are required to ensure the safety of the students. Property shown on the tax maps, the town of Monroe. This is in the LI zoning district over by Larkin Drive. The following are the plans and correspondence and documents which have been submitted in support of the application. The application was filed with the planning board on or about July 29th, 2021. A variance was issued on January 7th, 2022 to permit the 3-year extension of time. We, as a board, elected not to hold a public hearing. In terms of seeker, this is a type 2 action because it involves a routine activity of an educational institution by less than 10,000 square feet of gross floor area. And here you'll see that Ashley highlighted this text. So the application was previously referred to the Orange County Planning Department for review and report. And we're going to delete this sentence here.
So I'll change that to say, the new paragraph will read, this application has been referred to Orange County Planning Department for review and report. The Planning Department has not provided a report of its findings, and the time for it to provide such a report has now expired. And I made that change on mine, so don't worry about it.
Okay. I'm just summarizing it. All right. Findings. Planning board has determined that approval of this amended site plan will substantially serve the public convenience, safety, and welfare, will have a harmonious relationship with the existing or permitted development of contiguous land and of adjacent neighborhoods, will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or residents thereof, will not otherwise be detrimental to the public convenience or welfare, subject to compliance in full with conditions hereinafter imposed pursuant to section 5716G. This authorized the building inspector to issue permits to continue use of the temporary trailers in advance of site plan approval for the permanent relocation of the girls' school to the Glenwood 2 school site, already approved for that purpose. All right, resolution of approval. Now therefore, planning board resolves to approve this amended site plan to authorize the building inspector to issue a temporary trailer permit as said proposal is depicted on the plans. And then when the plans are addressed and revised satisfactorily, I will sign those plans. They can be filed. Approval is subject to final engineering review of the site plan set. The plan shall not be signed until receipt of a letter from the planning board engineer certifying that all deficiencies noted in his memo of 21 March 2023 has been remedied. Prior to the signing of the plans, all water and sewer lines serving the trailers on site should be shown on the plans. This shall be as shall a satisfactory lighting plan for the trailers. Prior to the signing of the plans, the applicant shall submit an owner's endorsement for tax parcel 21.2 authorizing the application. Prior to the signing of the plans shall be revised to 1, label tax map parcel 2-1-21.2 and label the existing temporary trailers that are being authorized. Signage, pavement striping, barriers, gates for the bus route and taxi route shall be maintained in good condition for the duration of the temporary use, and then except as hereby modified, all conditions attached to the original grant of site plan and special permit approval are to remain in effect, and that this approval is subject to and conditioned upon satisfaction of same. Approval is of a site that includes a permanent boys' school, matzah bakery factory, along with this temporary girls' school, and it's bound by all the conditions and limitation of those other approvals. We have the authority to enforce all conditions of the various approvals as against each or all of the 3 operators on the site. No trailer shall be issued until you satisfy with the condition of all roadway surfaces on the site. And the resolution authorized the building inspector to issue a temporary permit for the existing trailers previously approved by the planning board on September 18, 2018, for a period not to exceed a period of 3 years to expire on September 24, 2024, in the location shown. And then no single trailer shall exceed 24 feet in width by 36 feet in length. Maximum occupancy of each trailer shall be fixed by the Town of Monroe building inspector with occupancy limits noted on the temporary permit. All trailers shall meet applicable building code and relevant regulatory requirements. In no event shall the total occupancy of the new trailers exceed 120 persons. Applicants hereby authorized to continue the use of the temporary trailers previously approved, but the use of such trailers shall be limited to the same 3-year limitation. Upon expiration, all surface improvements, including the trailers, shall be removed, and operation of the temporary religious school use shall come to an end. And then the applicant shall comply with all the conditions of the ZBA decision of January 7, 2022. And then outdoor fixtures and amenities, site plan allows construction of only that which is shown in the plans identified above. And then there are a variety of general conditions that get attached to the resolution with regard to timeframes for approvals, other outside permits, and various conditions with regard to fees and expenses, entity disclosure statements, et cetera. So number 7, the temporary trailers is for a period of how many years?
Trailers is 3 years. The 2 years reference there is.
I think that's the standard language for site plan approval, but it might be a little different. And your 3 years is running from the date of the application, which is why even though we're in 2023, it goes to 2024. Oh, right, thank you.
Approval should be dated as the
Yeah, maybe the approval shall be effective for a period of, or, what was it, September? Whichever is sooner. So then somewhere in number 7 we'll say, or September 24th. September 24th? Okay. Whichever is sooner. So we'll make that one adjustment as well. All right, with that, I will make the motion that we adopt this resolution to approve the temporary permit for the trailers at, for Congregation Sherry Torah. May I have a second?
Second.
Pat seconds. Any discussion?
I think
Yeah,
you're,
if you scroll down to the bottom again, that chart, that the very last thing we were looking at there, right above it, up, right there. A failure to comply with any such condition in a timely manner shall result without further action in a lapsing of this approval. What does that mean? Failure to comply. So unless the applicant complies with any such condition in a timely manner shall result without further action in a
Elapsing
lapsing
of
this
the approval.
Was
So if
it-
they didn't satisfy all of the conditions that were required, this board wouldn't have to vote to withdraw the approval or anything. It would just be deemed expired or lapsed. So if they don't come back to ask for an extension, well, here they're not able to. But in the normal sense, typically they'd be able to get an extension. Or if they didn't do that within the requisite time period, then it would lapse. So you wouldn't have to vote to withdraw it. I was just talking to Sean though about number 7 and perhaps tweaking the language a little bit.
Okay.
I think you put September 24th, 2023 in number 7.
Oh. I think you're thinking of further changing it?
Yes, because the reference to
So that sentence could read, "A failure to comply with any such condition in a timely manner shall result without planning board further action in an expiration of this approval." I don't know if that. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we'll think of changing that wording if it's unclear for some, yeah. Anything, Ashley, we need to change further, or we'll edit? Okay. All right, so Pat made a second. Any discussion? Noreen?
Nick Napoli.
Aye.
Jeff Manson.
Aye.
Bonnie Franson.
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
Dylan Penn.
Aye.
With that, the motion carries, and this is approved. And so you'll coordinate with Sean to get the maps completed. All right.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right, so we're going to go back to Monroe Commons, Ninninger Road, Monroe, New York. If everybody come on up. Good evening. If you'd all introduce yourself for the record. Oh, and I'm going to bring up the Zoom, correct? Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Daniel Richmond with the law firm Zarin and Steinmetz.
I'm John Dahlgren from Tim Miller Associates.
Vince Peterzak.
Thank you. If you want to give an overview of where we are in the process.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, as you are aware, we submitted a draft of the preliminary draft of the draft environmental impact statement for the board and its consultants to review on February 23rd. We are in receipt yesterday as of several memos from your board, which we are looking forward to go over. I guess we're looking to discuss with you if you'd like to go over them this evening. We do have certain, we've had a preliminary chance to review them. I think it might be advantageous if we maybe could have set up some discussions offline between consultants, or maybe specific workshops targeted at specific impact areas to ensure that we are capturing all the board's requirements and understand, so that we can efficiently proceed with the revisions to the DEIS and submit it again for a review.
Right. So As you mentioned, a preliminary DEIS was submitted to the planning board, and the town's various consultants did review the DEIS to determine whether it is and should be deemed complete for purposes of starting public review. The various consultants have come back with comment letters. In addition to Ashley and Sean and their offices, we also have them from AKRF, Karen Arndt, I believe. Who were some of the others?
Frank Etchell,
Frank Etchell and
Dave Tompkins,
Dave Tompkins.
Aaron Warner,
And
AKRF.
from AKRF, yeah. Am I joined at this point? I just want to make sure that AKRF, because they're kind of leading and coordinating some of the
Joining.
effort.
If you could just say again all the memos that you have, so that we can just make sure we have all of them.
Please, yeah. Make sure the red light is on.
Yep. Sean, if you could just go over the memos that the planning board has, so we could be sure that we have them, so we're all on the same page, be appreciated.
Sure. So one from Ashley's office, one from my office, one from AKRF, from Aaron Warner, AKRF, and Frank Etchell from WSP. Excuse me, Weston and Sampson. And Dave Tompkins from CHA. And Karen Arendt from Karen Arendt Landscaping.
Total of 6 memoranda.
Correct.
Thank you.
So actually, I think I'm missing one. Might be the Weston and Sampson, because I see AKRF, CHA, CALA, MHE, and Norton and Toroli. Not in Torrey.
Morning, that,
Did that one come?
Frank Etchell, right?
Frank Etchell?
Yeah, it was the last one that came in by
Okay,
itself.
I'll add that here.
I thought he had sent it directly to you, so I might not have included you when no, I thought I put you when I did the whole board.
I'll add it. I just want to make sure that his came through for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make sure, Aaron, are you there? I don't know. I can't. Not muted. Aaron. There, I think we got him. Aaron, could you say something?
Can you hear me? I'm just
Now-
testing my mic out.
Yes, we're good.
All right, great.
Okay, so Ashley, why don't you sort of lead us through the process? We have the comment letters, and essentially the various consultants point out areas that need to be either revised or updated and supplemented to get to completeness.
or and just for the board's familiarity, because we don't always have this process before you. So you remember that you adopted this scoping document back in, I think it was November of 2020. And so what it means when we're referring to the completeness standard of the draft environmental impact statement, it's really whether it's adequate for public review. So not whether it's complete in the sense that you agree with everything and it's substantively complete, but has it addressed all of the areas that are required by your scoping document and by the law as well. So your various consultants have reviewed their individual areas, compared it to the scope, and gave comments on what they think needs to be added in order to reach that completeness standard. So this is really the first level of review that I don't know if the board also, in addition to the consultants' comments, if you have anything to add why you think it might be incomplete or complete, but that's really where you are. I'd think that at the end of our discussions here, you would likely be approving a motion to find that it's not complete and asking the applicant to respond to the items that have been raised by your consultants and also any other comments the board members have this evening. And I think just to And on Mr. Richmond's point, I think that the applicant's consultants can perhaps reach out if they have questions on any of the particular comments by the board's consultants, if they want clarity on things like that. I think that would be appropriate to reach out to those consultants directly, rather than have all of that minutia happen at a board meeting.
I think with that, I will just ask quickly, did the planning board members, did anyone have any comments in addition to those that the consultants may have? And I'll start to my left. Nick, anything you want to add at this point?
Comment.
Okay, Jeff?
Maybe get back to me. Leave me for last.
Okay,
For
sure.
you.
Yep, Pat?
So I take my son to Monroe Woodbury High School and pick him up every so often. And I noticed coming down Ninninger Road and taking a left on Dunderberg, that they're clearing a project there. I guess that's in the town of Woodbury. Anybody know what that is? And
Is that the big residential development?
I'm not sure.
Is it past where the garbage trucks are now?
Yes.
The
So,
KJ Garbage?
I know it's in Woodbury.
And it's Woodbury Junction, I think.
Take a left on Dunderberg to go up to Monroe Woodbury High School, and that whole area on the left is being cleared. And I'm just wondering what kind of project that's going to be and what, I know that we haven't, I don't know how much Woodbury's been involved in this, if at all. Right.
Woodbury is an involved agency. This applicant does require an approval from the Village of Woodbury Planning Board for a site plan or a clearing and grading permit, because some of the grading is proposed to be done on an adjacent parcel that is in the Village of Woodbury. So they're an involved agency. I think the applicant's been before them in some respect or submitted an application to them. As far as any application that's going on in the village, it may be relevant in terms of cumulative impacts, and if it's a project that might add to traffic
That's
or
what I'm
potentially
thinking
other issues.
Right. Traffic, everything else. And I just wondered if it's been considered.
So,
Because if it's a project, it's a large size project that's going to cause a lot of traffic, so on and so forth. I mean, already that area is kind of bonkers when it comes to traffic.
so we're talking about the cumulative impact and
Right.
making sure that all the developments are included.
Correct, and I just
So-
want to know whether it's been considered.
So, let me
I
just,
can weigh in, I think, on that.
okay, I want to make sure I understand the location. So this is Dunderberg Road, and here's the high school. Are you saying the area over here?
Come down Ninninger.
Okay, here's Ninninger.
Right.
And then here's, take a left.
Take a left on Dunderberg.
This is Dunderberg.
Right, okay, all the way down in the corner there. That whole area there is being cleared.
The corner in here?
Yes.
So I guess the question, is that all part of Woodbury Junction, which is this big development in here? I don't know the answer to that. And so the question would be, was whatever project may be going on at Dunderberg and Inninger included in the traffic? So Aaron, you wanted to say something?
Sure, so just obviously the project, by the way, sorry, Aaron Warner, AKRF. Back when we developed a scope for this EIS, and, almost 3 years ago now, we did have a list of projects that we wanted the applicant to include as the quote-unquote no action projects, right? What are happening in the area absent this project, that we could factor into the background growth and background traffic. I can check in to see if this site was included in that, but if it's not, one of our comments in the completeness review was to, obviously the scope called for trying to find out from all the municipalities involved here, projects that are planned, that might be either zoning changes or any kind of other projects that are planned in the area that we should know about. Since so much time has gone by, the comments that we included in our memo include to reach out to each municipality again and document that outreach and to show that it's been done and to try to get a better list of planned projects so we can make sure that they're covered in the chapters going forward.
And I would just say that you know, from a cumulative point of view, if it's a mini Monroe Commons that's going in there, that's one thing. If it's just houses, that's another. So,
Correct, yeah. Obviously, we would want to know what that is, and, you know, they can factor that in as far as maybe there's a traffic study on file for it, and they could build that into this traffic study. There's a lot of ways to do it, but thanks for calling that out. We can definitely, when we talk to the applicant offline, we can mention that as part of making sure the traffic study is updated correctly.
Sorry. I just to Mr. Shea's comment, I just want to point out, I think as Ashley correctly noted, the guiding document for determining completeness is the scoping document, and I think to Aaron's point, there is a section of the land use scope that says that one of the things we are to do is to describe land use changes expected to occur within a half mile of the site.
And this area, I think, would be within a half mile, so it should have been incorporated, so we'll find out. Yep. Dylan?
Nothing new to the consultants, but I just want to second and emphasize comment 23 and 24 of Sean's package, specifically sustainability and green energy measures. So it's something that throughout the review and discussions that I will personally challenge and request and emphasize throughout the process.
I will just add at this point, not anything specific, but I'll be in particular looking at landscaping and lighting in particular. I just want to make sure that we're as dark sky compliant as possible and that we're really greening up the site because there's a lot of earthwork being done, and I think we still want it to be as attractive as possible. Jeff?
I have a few things. A number of the comments that I have are editorial in nature as far as typos, misspellings, mislabelings, that sort of thing, which I'd like, I guess, Ashley, if it's appropriate, I'd like to get those sent over to you. You could take a look at them just to make sure that they're okay, and then maybe we could provide them in writing to the applicant. That'd be a little easier than going through them one by one. As far as other things, questions, comments, in the document, page 2-5, second paragraph down, it gives a description of the entrances, western and eastern. It enumerates, I guess for the eastern, that there's 3 lanes, 1 entering lane and 2 exiting lanes for westbound and eastbound traffic, but it doesn't really talk about how many lanes and the purpose of them for the western entrance. So we get a description of one and not the other. That would be helpful. In the paragraph under proposed building uses, it enumerates square footage for the retail space and the office space, breaking up the office space into the 3rd and 4th floor, but nothing telling us what the square footage is anticipated for the hotel. I think that would be beneficial. There's a couple of maps. One is in the section 2 maps. I'm looking at 2-2, where I believe Ninninger Road is labeled as Dunderberg, and on the other side of the highway, Industrial Park Road and Industrial Drive, I believe, are Larkin Drive. So just those corrections may need to be made. They have to be confirmed. And this specific map shows up in a couple of places. On figure 3.1, I think AKRF pulled this out, but there should be a legend for the zoning in KJ Palm Tree, just like there is for Monroe and Woodbury. That would be helpful for everyone looking at that diagram. I know there's only 2 kinds of zones, but that would clarify that.
Jeff, do you have your comments written that you'd be able to share them with the
I do.
applicant? Okay, great.
Yeah, that's why I'm going to go over like the editorial things and just talk about the questions, comments I have. Page 9-9, it references a minimum of 436 parking spaces are needed. There's no suggestion of what the maximum number of spaces that the applicant might think they need, and I guess I'm just wondering if, and whether it's permissible under our zoning, if more spaces could possibly be banked as part of the proposal. There's a reference in the traffic study to Appendix E, but in the DEIS that we have, I don't see Appendix E. I actually didn't see any of the appendixes for the traffic study when I was looking for that today, because it was going to break down the parking requirements more. 9-15, it references the possibility of transit providers like the buses from Monroe and from KJ wanting to stop on Ninninger Road. I'm opposed to that idea. I think it's not good for traffic flow with the vehicles pulling out. I'm assuming that there would be stops on the side for the buses to pull in and out of. Right now, there's no pedestrian pathway provided for between Ninninger Road and the entrances to the mall on the plans. The plan itself provides for circulation and a drop-off in front of the mall entrance for buses, taxis, automobiles. And if the buses aren't going in there, it sort of doesn't make sense. And my thought is if the fire trucks and the 18-wheel delivery trucks that we're dealing with for the 6 parking bays can get in and out of the center, then the buses probably should be able to too. It's going to be safer, it's going to be more convenient for people who are choosing to ride transit, and we certainly want to encourage that. Page 11-2, paragraph 6 and 7 talk about the trip generation, but it's based solely on office employee calculations, and I think that needs to be looked at as a mix of employees for office, retail, and hotel to be recalculated. It factors not only into trips into the parking center, but I think it goes to parking requirements as well, because you have to take into consideration that office hours tend to be 9 to 5 for most of those employees. Retail tends to be longer hours, people arriving before and after the store's closing. Many retail employees are part-time and are coming and going throughout the day. And the hotel operates 24/7. So I don't think that just looking at office employee calculations really does what we need to do. Page 11-4, paragraph 1, referenced the number of calls that the fire department typically goes on during the year, 600 and something. I didn't note that, but I was speaking with a fire official, happened to be earlier in the week, and he mentioned to me that they're on track for over 1,000 alarms this year. So I just asked that you reconfirm that with the department or the district. In the financial analysis, page 12-5, wondering, it talks about sales tax revenue that'll be generated from the project. I think it would be beneficial. If there's any way to estimate what the sales tax revenue from projected operations would be for the state and county, I think that would really speak to the benefit of the project and give us a sense of the economic impact locally. Page 15-2, paragraph 2, references the project next door, Voyelle Moshi Garden, and it references them either as 4 or 5-story buildings. However, they're 4-story buildings with an exposed basement, partially. None of those are actually 5-story buildings. A 5-story building would be against KJ's zoning code, and I wouldn't want to suggest they're an interested agency that they're doing something that's violating their own code. So I would appreciate if that were be reviewed. Everything else is editorial, and I'd be happy to provide those. Just little things. I think there were some autocorrects that happened that would just help with clarity.
A quick comment to Pat's question before. So that is part of the Woodbury Junction project. It's phase 7, so it is additional houses. So that's something that would be appropriate to, I'd think, look at in that half-mile distance for the.
Which
Yeah,
was that?
Is that project also known as Woodbury Junction?
Yes.
Right, so the scope that I'm looking at the adopted scope from 2020, page 23 of the scope talks about the future without the proposed project, and it's asking to make sure that the following projects are looked at. And in that bulleted list, there's a bullet that says remaining build out of 451 unit residential development, originally approved in 2006 under the name of Woodbury Junction. So I think that corner or that recently cleared site is most likely
Yes, it's
another
part
phase
of
of that
that. It's
project that
phase-
should definitely be factored in.
It's phase 7 of that project, so that would be, yeah.
Just a quick question. Did the Conservation Commission get a copy of the EIS? Because I think in the in the scope or in the DEIS for the ecology section, it discusses or says something to the effect that the Conservation Commission didn't provide any, or comments.
Just submitted to your board.
No, but there's something in the ecology section that says there wasn't any additional information provided by the Monroe Conservation Commission. And so my question is,
The DEIS wouldn't be provided to them yet until it's deemed complete by this board, but they did, I believe they had a site visit.
I know they had a
and
site
perhaps they
visit.
just, maybe they could clarify what was meant by that comment.
Right.
It might mean that they just didn't have any written comments to
Right.
give, or.
I didn't know if it was a matter of you were just seeking additional information, inventory information, and that they didn't provide any, but you did reach out to them, but if it could be clarified. And then, so just in general, with regard to that particular section, and I'm sure Dave Tompkins probably goes into it, but I felt that the narrative in the front was actually a little limited, because it talked about the fact that there were field surveys, and it seems like there was an excellent job at going out on the field on various days, various seasons to look for species. But then it kind of, narrows down into the species of concern and doesn't talk a little bit more generally enough about the ecology and the habitat. There is a full list of everything that was encountered in the rear of the document. But I think some of that, just some more substance up in the main text. And in particular, I wanted to know if that table could be amended to note whether or not any of the other species that were observed were, for instance, species of special concern. Or whether they were all they didn't have a status. So I just want to make sure that nothing popped up that had any kind of designation, and it was unclear to me.
Tell me what table?
So it's in Appendix E, so that's one of the things, is that all the, various species that were observed are in the appendix. And so there's a very long listing of that. What I wanted to know, for instance, spotted salamander, is that a common species? Some of these could be species of special concern, or any of them, regulated that were encountered. Just to have some footnote or something in the table that says, none of the observed species are, regulated as threatened, endangered, et cetera. Yeah. And again, I think just to put a little bit more meat up front in the text about the relationship of the species and ecology, the habitats.
We'll look at that certainly. We're trying to follow the scope, so.
Understood. Yep. And so for the benefit of the public that might be watching, and also just the board members, obviously there'll be a whole substantive review of this. This is just to determine whether it's complete, so that everybody can begin their substantive, review and provide their comments. So that's where we are in the process. Do you have any comments or questions? Or I know you have to absorb all the comment letters, and it's fine with me if we want to set up additional meetings. Certainly you can coordinate with our consultants if you have questions on the comment letters. And if you want to set up, some kind of more coordinated Zoom meeting, we can do that as well. So, just let us know.
I mean, again, we just had a preliminary chance review. We do have certain questions. I'm not sure if, again, to Ashley's point, if we want to go over the minutia right now, we'd be happy to, after we've had a better chance. I think it might be more productive to set up discrete meetings on specific topic areas, so that we could work, after we've had a chance to go through everything, we can kind of then focus specifically any questions we may have, any clarification we may need. I think there are certain comments in some of the memos that go beyond the scope, so that would be my suggestion on how to approach this, Madam Chair. Again, we did just get these memos. We can give you some questions.
And we just received them too, so.
I understand.
So we have to
understand.
absorb them as well.
So I think, John and Vince, if you have another opinion, but I think the best way to approach this, I appreciate all the board members letting us know their concerns, because it's, part of this process is to help us understand your board's concerns, all the other interested, involved agencies, the public's concerns. That. Right now, our goal is to get back a complete DIS back to you. So we need to review the memos, start diving into them. And again, I think what we should be doing, in my opinion, is, as necessary as maybe just proactively set up discrete meetings on specific topic areas.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. I have a question with regard to process, because I think we're still within our 45 days to review for completeness. I think we're about a month in based on the date of the EIS, which is, I believe, it's the 23rd. So we're a month in. So if the board members, because it's a big document, if they have some comments, do they have a little extra time? Obviously, we're going to determine that it's incomplete given the comment letters that we've received. But, an additional week or so, if Jeff wants to put his comments together just to afford a little bit more time to get things in. Is that reasonable? So can we say it's incomplete?
I think you could
and-
determine, you would approve a motion to find that it's incomplete, ask the applicant to address the comments noted by your consultants, and I think any other, and I just want to clarify, when the board does submit comments, they would just be on this completeness standard. So not
Right.
understand that you likely have substantive comments at this time. If you could write those, keep those kind of aside, just to not raise those yet. There'll be plenty of time for that, but just to kind of focus where we are on this completeness standard, I think that
Yeah.
that shouldn't be a problem.
And
I would
it
say
could be
we would
that.
welcome any comments from the board
Yeah.
on completeness. We're certainly looking to your board for guidance, so we're looking to
Okay.
want to hear your comments.
Yeah, and I would just say that, obviously, if there's some comments that appear to be more substantive in nature, then we can go over that and see what, if anything, should be deferred, because it's more of a substantive comment than a completeness comment. So,
There are certain issues I think may, in some of the memos, may go beyond the scoping document. I guess I can raise those directly with Ashley, and we can
so I would just suggest that, so we'll deem the DEIS incomplete, and then let the planning board have until the 31st, let's say, to get any additional comments in. Do you think that's reasonable? Okay, so that you have the benefit, if there's any more from the planning board directly.
Hey, Bonnie, and then, upon resubmission of the document, whenever that may be, I assume the applicant needs a little time to go through everything, talk with us and the other consultants. The regulations say that once that's resubmitted, there's an additional 30-day review on completeness, which can be mutually extended, per the regulations, but.
Correct.
So the initial is 45, and then on the resubmission is 30. That's what the regulations say.
Correct, and I think the new regulations also say that we're not supposed to introduce new completeness comments. We're supposed to be whittling these down, not adding to them. So
Right.
let's just be mindful that, we need to be as complete as possible the first time around. So with that, then, I will make a motion that the planning board deem the DEIS for Monroe Commons incomplete based on the comments that have been raised by the planning board to date, as well as the consultant comment letters, and that the planning board will have an additional time period until end of day 3/31/23 to submit any completeness comments or any comments it may have, and then I think you all can determine whether they're completeness or substantive. Even if they're substantive, it might still help to have them in advance. So with that, may I have a second?
Second.
Dylan seconds. Noreen? It was.
Okay, well, now we're starting on this side. Dylan Penn,
Aye.
Pat Shea,
Aye.
Bonnie Francis,
Aye.
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Aye.
Can I ask, maybe if we could just now get points of contact for each of, the different consultants, so that our consultants can reach out to them?
I think I have those.
Yeah. A motion carries.
Oh, no,
Motion
I
approved.
thought the motion already carried. I apologize.
All right, so you should have the contact information for
If
everybody.
there's any you don't have, Dan, you could shoot me an email, or If there's any you don't have, just shoot me an email and I'll.
Got it. Okay.
All
Can I
right.
just add one more thing, Bonnie?
Sure.
Sorry. Just as the board members are taking a look, by that end of March deadline, the key thing to keep in mind is, again, it's completeness against the adopted scope, which is from 2020. It's November 2020 is when it was adopted. It might be the best practice to have that, in hand as you're reviewing the document, to go down the list in the scope as you're reviewing to see if there's anything that you see was not accounted for. That's basically what all of us did in reviewing the document over the last few weeks. So remember, it's completeness as per the scope requirements, not necessarily if you agree or disagree with analysis provided. It's did they cover everything the scope called for? And I can send around that scope again if not everybody has it.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Pat?
I just want to make one comment before you guys leave. When you go down Ninninger Road from 305, until you get to the building that I think Joel is in, right there where Monroe Commons is going to be, there are no more trees. And a little bit further down where they're doing the Woodbury Junction thing, they've cleared all the trees. So to the extent possible, trees do give off oxygen. There's not going to be a lot of oxygen in that area. But to the extent possible, especially with these big trees, try and keep them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly to my point, that we are going to be a green Monroe. That's always been part of the mantra.
Right.
And landscaping, which is why we retain Karen, because we really want to see something different.
I think could be the most densely populated area in the county. And I just want to do it the best we can, as you do, I'm sure.
We'd like to see some street trees on Ninninger. Thank you. Anything else? Board members? Sean? Ashley?
I guess if everyone maybe wants to send their planning board member comments to me and Noreen, that way we'll compile them all and then get them
Yeah, that'd
to
probably
the
be
applicant at
easiest.
once so that they're not getting multiple.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
You too. All right, next item on the agenda, I believe, is BJ's. And this is for an extension of a approval, as well as a request to be able to clear trees before bat season.
Correct.
Okay.
We're asking for we have the approval to clear the trees. It's a condition of the signing of the site plan. The site plan will not be signed before April 1st, so we're asking that the board allow us to clear the trees prior to April 1st, and also ask for an extension to sign the site plan for the remainder of the conditions.
Bonnie, I'm just going to recuse myself for this application.
Thank you for reminding me, Jeff. So Jeff is recused from this. Do we bring up, do we need to bring up an alt? Since Jeff has recused himself? Okay. Louis, you can come on up here and fill Jeff's position. So let the minutes reflect that Louis will sit in for Jeff. He makes such an effort to come here. I want you to be part of the team. Did we have a resolution for the extension?
No, not a separate resolution for that.
Okay. So,
Actually, because I thought I read in the resolution that we were being extended for 2 years. Is that correct?
So the way, it's an amended resolution, so it does have all of your standard languages, so that would effectively, because it's amending your prior approval, would also carry that same time frame to satisfy the conditions as was with the original approval. So I believe it's 180 days.
okay, so that then,
Covered. So by approving the resolution, you'll get that 180 days.
That was my understanding from reading the draft resolution.
okay. So, does everybody understand what's being requested? BJ's is still going through the approval process. They need some, I think, agency approvals at this point.
That's correct.
Especially O&R.
O&R primarily.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so as a result, because their site plan is coming close to expiring, they need an extension to be able to continue the process. Any comments on that? Questions? Sean, anything?
Just the one, I think, big thing, sorry if I missed it, but is O&R, that you're just waiting for a response.
That's correct.
All right.
Out of the applicant's hands.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so with that, I think we'll scan through this resolution that Ashley has prepared. This is the second amended resolution of conditional approval, site plan for RD Management LLC, the BJ's Wholesale Club Automotive Fueling Station and Pad Restaurant site.
Do you want me to point out, because what I did with this is I redlined the changes that were done to the prior resolution that you had adopted, so a lot of it is a repeat of what was already adopted, and I could just point out where it's been changed.
Do I have the red lines?
I think it's just, I think the way you're viewing it, they're not showing up perhaps, because see how there's that on the left?
Well, it won't be until you get to paragraph 22, where the
Okay.
red lines start.
So this is the same resolution as what was previously approved. So this is for the proposed automotive fueling station with the 6 pump islands, just for the benefit of those who may not have been involved previously. And then the restaurant pad that is next to it. And so this repeats the prior site plan resolution. And I'm just going to scroll down. That was a correction, site plan instead of subdivision plan. So in terms of the conditions, they remain the same, except for when we get to 22. These are new. So given the date of the amended approval and the New York State DEC tree removal restrictions, and so for those of you that aren't aware, because we are in an area that has Indiana bat and northern long-eared bat species, one of the mitigations and to ensure their population isn't disrupted is to cut trees outside of their foraging season and maternity roosting season. And so the trees have to be cut before March 31st. And because this isn't advancing, but it's likely to in the next couple months, they didn't want to be delayed until like November to start. So that's what this 22 is addressing. So the applicant shall be permitted to clear trees, and normally you wouldn't do that until you had a signed site plan, prior to the signing of the plan, subject to the following and prior to commencing any tree removal. Compliance with the erosion and sediment control plan as such may be updated as authorized by the planning board engineer. Issuance of a land activity permit from the stormwater management officer pursuant to code chapter 46. Posting of a performance guarantee required in town code chapter 46, which shall include the cost to replace the trees for the period prior to the signing of the plan. And then prior to the signing of the plan, the applicant shall post with the town clerk all required performance, security, restoration, security, inspection fees and maintenance guarantees and amounts to be fixed by the town board upon recommendation by the town engineer in order to ensure compliance with the approved tree plan and the tree preservation law, satisfactory to the town board, town engineer, and town attorney as to form, sufficiency, manner of execution, and surety. Bond shall remain in place for a minimum of 1 year after all new trees or replacements, if necessary, are planted to ensure such plantings are alive and thriving. And then I will continue down. Did the general conditions, they're all the same? Okay. So is that the primary change? All right. Okay, so then with those changes, would someone like to make a motion that we approve this second amended resolution? So Louis made the motion, second.
Second.
Pat seconds it. Noreen?
Aye.
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 Thank you. With that, the motion carries, and you can continue to, I guess you'll go off to the building inspector and get whatever land clearing permits necessary.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. There was a long agenda in front of you.
Said him first.
Yeah, you really should have been first. Thank you. Thank you, Louis, for sitting in. And Jeff, you can come back up. And in terms of agenda, we are now to the point of minutes. And we are going to do minutes tonight. So, Ashley or Sean, anything you want to bring up before we tackle some minutes? Okay. So I am going to suggest we take a 2-minute break before we tackle minutes, because we are not leaving this meeting without getting to them. All right. George, we're going to take a 2-minute break. George?